Okay, so we are going to practice subtracting fractions with different denominators. Okay, good. So let's start off with an example. Let's say we have 4 over 7 minus 8 over, let's do this, over 7 over 8. Okay, so we have a different denominator, so what's our first step to subtract these fractions? Okay, so I think there are a few things we have to do before we start. First of all, whenever we add or subtract fractions, we have to make sure that the denominators are the same, right? And what's our strategy for finding a common denominator? So what are the multiples of 7? Next one we can think of, what's 8 plus 7? Really close. So let's break this up. So I want to get 28 to 30. How do I do that? Right, so an easy way to break this up to think about it is, okay, I want to get 28 to 30, so I can add 2. 2 minus 7 is 5. 30 plus 5 equals 35. So it's 35. Okay. And what are our multiples of 8? Okay, so do we have a common denominator in this list yet? No. Okay, so let's keep going with 7. 7 plus 35. Hmm. 42 plus 7. And let's try one more for good measure. 49. Go ahead. Good. Okay, let's keep going with 8. 48 plus 8. Are we good, or do we have to keep going? Right. Okay, so we have our common denominator, 56. So how can we rewrite 4 over 7 to have a denominator of 56? Okay, so let's think about this. Basically, what we're trying to say is 7 times blank equals 56, right? Okay, and what did you get? And how did you figure out it was 8? Good. Okay, that's a really good strategy. I like that you came up with that, because that's a pretty effective way to figure it out. Another way is we can do 7 times blank equals 56. And whenever we have an equation like this, to get this on the other side, we do the opposite of whatever's happening here, right? So I can divide this side by 7, and I can divide this side by 7. 7 divided by 7 is 1, so this cancels out. So now I get blank is equal to 56 divided by 7. And 56 divided by 7, if you plug that into your calculator, is 8. Did that make sense at all? Okay, good. So basically I'll show you the example, but so good. So 4 times 8 is 32. And 7 times 8 we decided was 56. Now we have our fraction 7 over 8. And how do we change this denominator to make it so it's 56? And what do we put in our numerator? Good. 7 times 7. Exactly, good. And 8 times 7 we decided was 56. Okay, so we rewrite our fractions with common denominators. That's always going to be our first step whenever we're adding or subtracting fractions. Doesn't matter if we're adding or subtracting, we always need to find a common denominator. Okay, good, so let's rewrite that. We decided that 4 over 7 was rewritten as 32 over 56. Right, we keep our minus. And we decided that 7 over 8 we could rewrite as 49 over 56. Okay, so now we have a problem where we're subtracting numbers with the same sign. So whenever we are subtracting, our step is to rewrite as addition, right? Do you remember that idea that we talked about last week? And how do we rewrite this equation right here so that it's addition instead of subtraction? Exactly. And that's the case whether the signs are the same or different. When we're talking about subtraction, we always want to rewrite this as addition. And do I keep this number the same or do I have to change it if I rewrite this as addition? Okay, so not quite. So this half, I'm really glad that you got this. We change it to addition. But we actually have to rewrite this as the opposite. So what's the opposite of positive 49 over 56? Exactly. So if you want to write down this idea on a piece of paper or somewhere where you have notes, whenever we're subtracting two numbers, we have to add the opposite. And once we add the opposite, we have our strategies for adding numbers with different signs or the same signs. In this case, are we talking about adding numbers with the same sign or adding numbers with different signs? Exactly. So what's our first step in adding two numbers with different signs? And what's the absolute value of 32 over 56? And negative 49 over 56 is 49 over 56. Good. And then what do we do with these absolute values that we got? Okay, so do you have that piece of paper where you wrote down the notes on adding two numbers with different signs and same signs? Good. Awesome. So we can check this out and we can say, okay, after we find the absolute value of both numbers, the second step is to subtract the smaller absolute value from the greater absolute value. So It's the same exact steps as if these weren't fractions, but these are just fractions in this case. It doesn't change our process. It just changes, we do have to do a little bit different, but we're doing the same idea where we find the absolute value, we subtract the bigger from the smaller, and then we use the sign from the bigger absolute value for our answer. So in this case, we subtract our bigger from our smaller. Which one is bigger? And how do you know that 49 over 56 is bigger than 32 over 56? Right, and because the denominators are the same, we can compare the numerators totally fine. So we do 49 over 56 minus 32 over 56. Now how do we subtract this fraction right here? Yeah, and we can do it in our calculator. Okay, good. So the way that we do this is we subtract the first numerator from the second numerator. So does our denominator stay the same or does it change? In adding and subtracting, our denominator stays the same, and we subtract the numerators. 49 minus 32. We can plug that into our calculators. We get 17 over 56. Okay, do you have any questions about this process? Maybe about finding the common denominator, rewriting addition as subtraction as addition, or subtracting this fraction right here? Okay, good. Okay. Let's try another practice. And this one's going to be the same idea, but we're going to change it up just a little bit. Let's do 8 over 9 minus negative 6 over 3. Okay. So we're subtracting fractions. Do these have the same sign or different signs? Yeah, okay. So what's our first step when we're subtracting or adding fractions? No matter what. If we're adding, subtracting, signs are different, signs are the same, what do we have to do? Okay, good. So that is our step. Normally that's our step, right? If we have a fraction, we do have to find a common denominator before we do that. So maybe on this sheet, we write a step 0 that says, if it's a fraction, find a common denominator. And even if we're adding two numbers of the same sign, we can write a step 0, right? Find common denominator. If it's not a fraction, we can move on. We don't have to deal with that. Okay, so how can we find a denominator between these two fractions? So 9, 18, 27. And for 3, we're going to write 3, 6, 9. I'm speeding through this because I think you're good at this process already. So I want to focus on the other part of the problem. So do we have a common denominator here? Yes, it's 9. Now, do we have to rewrite the fraction 8 over 9? No. It already has our common denominator as its denominator, so it stays the same. How about 6 over 3? So what do we multiply this fraction by? And what's the numerator of the thing that we're multiplying? 3, exactly. Good catch. Right, exactly the same. Good, okay, so 6 times 3, that's equal to 18. 3 times 3 is equal to 9. And now we can rewrite this as 8 over 9 minus 18 over 9. Okay, so now that we have our fraction written as a common denominator, what's our first step when we're subtracting any sort of number? Okay, so that is our first step if we're adding two numbers with different signs. You're right, we find the absolute value, or even if we're adding two numbers of the same sign. So let's write out a little steps for subtracting numbers. So, our first step would be to check if it's a fraction. We could say find common denominator if it is. Are you writing this down? Okay, good. Our second step would be rewrite subtraction as addition. And the way that we do that is we add the opposite. For example, we have 5 minus 3. We can rewrite this as 5 plus negative 3. Right, we take the opposite of our second number. So let me know when you're ready to move on to the last step. Okay, good. And now that we have an addition problem, we can say, do our steps for addition. Right, and we have our addition steps written down. So almost like a flow chart. We get to here, now that we've rewritten it as addition. We can do our steps for addition. Does that make sense? Good. Okay, do you have any questions about this process? Okay, so let's keep going on this problem that we were working on. So our first step is to check if numbers are fraction, find the common denominator. We did that. Now we can rewrite the subtraction as addition. And the way that we do that is add the opposite. So how can I rewrite this fraction as addition? And remember that I also have to change my second number as well. So I add the opposite of my second number. We can even write this in, add the opposite of second number. Right. So what's the opposite of negative 18 over 9? Right. Okay. Now we have this as addition. Do we know how to add two numbers with the same sign? So now we find the absolute value of the numbers, right? 8 over 9, 18 over 9. And because these two have the same sign, we just add them together. And how do I add this fraction here? Right, for the denominator, we don't add. And for the numerator, we just do 18 plus 8, right? That's equal to 26. So do you have any questions on this process where we subtract two numbers with different signs? Okay. So I think you're getting really, really good at finding common denominators. You're very good at knowing when to add denominators and when to keep them the same, when to multiply them and whatnot. I think the thing that's getting you caught up is rewriting this step here, rewriting subtraction as addition. Do you find that that can be difficult sometimes? Okay, so let's practice that a little bit. So if I have 6 minus 9, what I want you to do, whenever we have any sort of subtraction, I want you to circle this number, and I want you to take it, and I want you to write it separately. And I want you to say the opposite of 9 is, and you write the opposite of 9. Right? Now what we can do, we know the opposite of 9 is negative 9. We rewrite this negative as a positive, right? Because we're changing to addition. And we add the opposite. Negative 9. So 8 minus 7. Circle my second number, which is 7. The opposite of 7 is negative 7. Now how can I rewrite this? 8 minus 7 as addition. Okay, so when you do 8 plus 7, have we added the opposite? No. So how can I make 7 the opposite of 7? So I can put this as negative 7. So maybe we can circle the second number. And we can draw an arrow. So we can say 4 minus 3. I can write out the sentence. The opposite of my second number, which is 3. The opposite of 3 is negative 3. I can circle the number that comes out here and put it as, replace that with 3. So I can write 4 plus the number that came out of here is negative 3, and I can rewrite that as addition. So let's practice that really quickly. 8 minus 6. What number do I circle here? And what's the opposite of 6? So I'm going to circle the number that comes out of here. Now I have 8 plus blank equals, and what number do I put right here? Exactly. Good. Okay, so we will practice this more tomorrow, making sure we really understand